Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the 2020 Thrilling 32.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Thrilling 32. Danny, we are all set for round 2 of the most exciting bracket tournament, maybe all year long, right? The most exciting. I can't think of a single bracket tournament that's more exciting than this, right?
Except maybe the Tournament of Terrible.
Well, that's true. That too is going on at the same time here. But Danny, this is the real game. This is the real main event. This is the Thrilling 32. And Danny, we are going to narrow the field down from 16 tonight to 8 roller coasters, wood and steel. So Danny, any thoughts before we move into the brackets?
Yeah, I mean, the first round was exciting. We had a lot of favorites move on. We had some upsets. We had a couple of big upsets.
People losing their minds about Phoenix on the comment section on the last video.
And that's the first thing I wanted to mention because, you know, we're gonna talk about the coaster here again in the second round, and we'll see if it moves on again to the third round. But you know, maybe the coaster from P&E Playland is wearing that glass slipper again. But you know, people need to stop being surprised by the coaster from P&E in this tournament. The last 4 or 5 years, it's done very, very well. It went to the Final Four one year. It's been a top 10 ride for the last several years now. This is a ride that should no longer be surprising people. And I get it. Phoenix is the much more popular ride. I think Phoenix is the better ride. But people need to stop being surprised about that ride picking off these historically highly ranked rides because the coaster is an exceptional roller coaster. And it still amazes me how many people who do this year after year are still surprised and still do not trust the coaster from P&E, because that's what you and I were skeptical on for many, many years. And then I went and wrote it and said, no, this ride is the real deal. And I'm really, really surprised that people are just still not trusting that ride really at all.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Phoenix and Coaster are usually pretty similarly ranked. In the final standings here. That traditionally there's not a whole lot separating these two coasters. You even made some comparisons between Coaster and Phoenix when you went out to go ride it, saying that there's some similarities there maybe with the way they ride.
Yeah, I mean, the best comparison that we came up with for the coaster was saying it's the Canadian version of the Phoenix. It's got the high lap bars, no seat belts. It's very smooth. It's a ride that is, you know, somewhat mild in the first third, and then it gradually picks up its intensity as the ride goes on, and it sort of saves its fiercest attack for the very end.
So Coaster and Phoenix, you know, I think there's, like you said, there's a lot of comparisons. Stop being surprised when this happens. And count me among the guilty.
I mean, I think Phoenix is the better ride. I mean, I last year, like you said, very close to one another. Phoenix was number 7, Coaster was number 6. I think Phoenix is the better ride, so I'm still surprised myself, but not as surprised as everyone else.
Yeah. So, well, Danny, let's see if there's any more surprises awaiting us today, moving on into the Elite 8. So, Danny, where do we start? The Son of Beast region?
Yes, let's start with the Son of Beast region in the wood bracket. We've got Ghost Rider from Knott's Berry Farm going up against Outlaw Run from Silver Dollar City. Andy, you had both of these correct in the first round. Who do you have moving on here?
I got to find my list here. You know, it's as painful it is for me to say, I love Ghost Rider. I'm a huge Ghost Rider fan, but I, of course, picked Outlaw Run here to go over Ghost Rider.
Yeah, I mean, Outlaw Run has been a top 10 ride throughout the history of the Thrilling 32, a top 5 ride most years, and a 2-time champion, one of only a couple rides to have won multiple championships here. And it is Outlaw Run moving on to the Elite 8 here, and it's not getting any easier for Outlaw Run because we've got Rampage from Alabama Splash Adventure, which a little bit of an upset, maybe you would say, over Mystic Timbers in the first round. Going up against the Voyage from Holiday World, the defending champ for the last 2 years, 3-time champion. And, we'll see what happens here. Rampage and Mystic Timbers last year were 11 and 12, respectively. We'll see where they end up falling again this year. I think it's safe to say that they were pretty close to one another, but there's no upset in store here, do you think?
No.
That was pretty simple there. Yes, it is the Voyage. Moving on to the Elite 8, and we'll see the Voyage against Outlaw Run, which has been a championship matchup a couple times, I think. We've seen this matchup before, and we've seen different results over the course of the years here. What are your thoughts on the Outlaw Run Voyage matchup resurfacing again here?
Outlaw Run is one of those rides that you always have to give pause because it's won championships before. It seems that Voyage has kind of settled into a groove here in the Thrilling 32. Maybe just assuming people are gonna, are gonna vote it as champion. And I feel like last year might have been Outlaw Run's year to make a run because of Time Traveler opening up. With all the new people or maybe old people returning to Silver Dollar City to ride Time Traveler. If Outlaw Run was going to make a run, I thought last year was the year to do it. Yeah. This year, I don't think it's got a shot here against Voyage.
No, I think that's a pretty good analysis you just gave there. Touched on a lot of good points. So we'll see next week who moves on to the Final Four out of the Son of Beast region. But moving on to the Zingo region, we've got 2 rides that are quite a bit lesser known. We've got Balder from Liseberg going up against the Boardwalk Bullet from Kima Boardwalk. Now, similarly to the Coaster, Balder has always been a ride that very quietly has done very, very well in this, but the Boardwalk Bullet has been on a little bit of a recent rise. I got to ride it just a few years ago, last year, and I very much enjoyed the Boardwalk Bullet. Which way did you go on this? Did you have both of these correct in the first round?
Yes. So I had both of these going in the first round. This one was one I really struggled with because, like you said, Balder always has that strong showing in the Thrilling 32. That's been established. But like you said, Boardwalk Bullet. Every time you talk to somebody new is going down to ride Boardwalk Bullet. Somebody is raving about Boardwalk Bullet. Now, I don't know because I have not yet ridden that ride, I don't know if that's a case of it being an elite tier ride or a case of people just being surprised that it's really good. And not expecting something down on a boardwalk pier to be that good of a wood coaster. So I went with Boardwalk Bullet. I'm not confident in that decision whatsoever. Like I said, this is one that I really struggled with looking at and trying to decide what was going to happen. Would we see a move up of Boardwalk Bullet? Because Boardwalk Bullet would have to move up to beat Balder. That traditionally Balder's always been the better ranked ride, correct?
No, you're right. It typically is. It's been higher historically, and it is Balder moving on in the Zingo region here. So Balder does move on to the Elite Eight. Once again, very, very strong showing here for Balder. And it will take on the winner of our GCI battle, Thunderhead from Dollywood, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, going up against Gold Striker from California's Great America in Santa Clara, California. If ever there were two rides that have been compared to one another since they've both been open, it might be these two. Both of these rides have a lot of things in common. Gold Striker's a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, a little bit longer, I believe, but they both have the big drops, the sweeping turns, the quick directional changes, the station fly-throughs, the Millennium flyers, the fun pre-lift section. All of those things are in both of these rides. And the other thing that these two rides have in common are they are rides that you have historically been disappointed with in your rides.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of either of these two rides. I like Gold Striker better than Thunderhead. Neither of these two rides are rides that I'm like overly excited to go re-ride. If I ride them, I ride them. If I don't, I don't. It's not a huge deal to me. That being said, though, I do think that Gold Striker, like I said, is the better of the two, and I think Gold Striker is going to win this matchup.
Well, moving on to the Elite Eight to take on Balder will be Gold Striker from California's Great America. Andy or Barczyk, you've got a pretty solid second round going on here.
Yeah, well, that's all going to change soon.
Well,
speaking of changing soon.
Speaking of that changing soon, we'll move on to one where you had not such good news.
No, had a hell of a time picking coasters. Went 1 for 4.
You went 1 for 4 in the Rolling Thunder region here too. That's
1 for 4.
And let's be honest here, not too many people had the one that you got right. Just about everybody had that one right as well. So I think one person had that one wrong in this region. But the big thing for you was you had Phoenix going to the Final Four, getting knocked out in the first round here, like we talked about at the show open.
Yeah, I thought your hatred of El Toro would finally have Phoenix knock it out. That's not going to happen. But Danny Miller, there's no one saying that Coaster won't be the one to knock off El Toro here.
Well, and that's I'm not saying. I'm just saying. There's a chance. There's a chance. But
before that happens, it's got to get past Goliath, which
it does have to get Goliath, which again has done very, very well historically in this poll, and it has a lot of riders because it's up there. In your neck of the woods, we have a lot of fans, a lot of viewers, a lot of voters that ride Goliath an awful lot, and a lot of our biggest fans, a lot of the Patreon people got to ride Goliath for the first time this year because of the Great America Bash. So what are your thoughts on a little bit of a spike in Goliath this year?
Well, I'll tell you what, the overwhelming opinion coming out of the Great American Bash was that Goliath was a fantastic roller coaster. And I think Goliath, Goliath gets forgotten a lot in the RMC discussion. Unfairly so, I think, because Goliath is a great ride. It's short. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not a short ride. It's short, but on the same token, so is Lightning Rod, so is Outlaw Run. It's got a few great elements. That first drop is really, really great. The overbanks are some of the best done overbanks for RMC. The stalls, the two of them are out of this world amazing, especially the stall underneath the lift hill, which just feels like it goes on forever. And then you got tons of airtime all over the place. Especially if you sit, towards the front, you get that extra pop of airtime going into the brake ride. I think Goliath is overlooked amongst the RMC roller coasters. I don't know why that is. I think it's a fine example. Is it better than Outlaw Run or Lightning Rod? I don't think so, but is it better than something like Storm Chaser? Absolutely. That's not even a question in my mind. Is it better than Wicked Cyclone? I think it's better than Wicked Cyclone. I think it's better than New Texas Giant. So you look at all those, and I know I'm comparing wood and steel, but luckily I have, critical thinking ability.
You're an intelligent person. You have the capacity to do such things. So moving on out of the Rolling Thunder region to the Elite Eight, in this matchup, it is the Coaster from PNE Playland. Andy, that glass slipper is on a little tighter now. Is the Coaster? Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
I got news for you, Danny. I got news for you. I'm the biggest Coaster fan out there right now. I'm like Mr. Coaster fan.
If you want a shot at winning this bracket, and we'll show the standings at the end because when we recorded the first round, the submissions were not yet finished, so we didn't have the full standings. We will talk about the standings for the contest at the end here for just a few minutes, and we'll see exactly where you are. But like we said in the first round show, not many people picking Coaster to even get out in the first round, so the odds of a lot of them having it in the Final Four even less. So you're definitely rooting for the Coaster to go all the way.
Absolutely. Knock off El Toro, and then everyone can yell.
But before it gets there, Andy, El Toro has to knock off Hades 360, and it's a battle of two rides with fire in their logos. We talked about this. Hades 360 is one of those rides that we never really talk about this time of year because it always seems to have a bad matchup in the first round. But Hades 360 very quietly, pretty much always a top 20 ride.
Yeah, it's not going to beat El Toro, Danny.
Okay. No, it's not. It's El Toro moving on out of the Rolling Thunder region. A nice first round victory for Hades 360 there. And again, a ride that does rank pretty well historically. But now, Andy, we can talk about it. El Toro, the Coaster, El Toro, the Coaster. Is El Toro trending down just a little bit? Coaster is hanging in there strong. It's beaten the Phoenix. These are almost definitely both top 10 rides in the top 50 rankings here. What are your thoughts here looking at this now as someone who, Phoenix, your horse is not in the race here. So looking at it from an outsider's perspective, what are your thoughts going into this matchup next week?
Well, like I said, I'm a huge Coaster fan, but objectively speaking, if I was to re-pick this round, I would definitely have El Toro going over Coaster. But stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have happened because you know what? The Coaster.
What the hell's Eliza Bonnet? That's all I want to know, Danny. That's all
well, that's exactly right. And the Coaster has been to the Final Four before. Yeah. So, we've seen it happen. Let's move on to the final region. It is the Mean Streak region. And, Andy, you look at this region from the first round, and it's almost as if you already know the two rides that are moving on here. Colossus knocked off Prowler in the first round, and Lightning Rod knocked off Wodan Timber Coaster. Renegade knocked off Shivering Timbers, which I think was the real difficult one in this region, and then Wildfire knocked off the Legend from Holiday World. But I mean, the two front runners here are the two RMCs, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. In this first matchup here with Colossus against a Lightning Rod, though, I do think there's some cause for concern for Lightning Rod because did Colossus jump up that much higher based on the retrack, based on the retheme? Are we seeing that going to be a lot stronger? My initial inkling is no. I did not pick it that way. I of course have Lightning Rod moving on. But once again, I had to pause to think a little bit about this matchup.
No, I think you bring up some interesting points and enough to cause just a little bit of concern for the folks that have Lightning Rod going deep, which is just about everybody. But it is Lightning Rod moving on to the Elite Eight here, and I don't think that's a big surprise to anyone. And we'll see who it goes up against in the Elite Eight here between Renegade and Wildfire. Renegade is a ride that we get emails about people who just rave about Renegade. I mean, if there's one ride we get more messages about that they think is underrated, Renegade might be that ride. And then meanwhile, Wildfire, a ride that not a lot of people have been on. Hopefully the next time I go overseas, that will be on the docket, but that's at least a year or two away still. But a ride that gets very good reviews from the people who've had ridden it. Was a top 5 coaster last year. What do you think of this?
You know, I love Renegade. So let's start there. But I did not have Renegade getting out of the first round. I had Shivering Timbers beating Renegade here. So for me, this is an easy choice. Wildfire moving on. But that is not to diminish the quality ride that Renegade is. I do think Renegade is another one of those coasters that gets lost in the mix, maybe because it's up north at Valley Fair. Not a whole lot of people get up there. If they do get up there, most people are raving about Renegade.
No, I agree. And Renegade is one that I have not ridden in 4 or 5 years, and it is on the itinerary this year to finally get back and ride Renegade again this year. So hopefully I will. But Andy, in the Elite Eight, we'll see that RMC battle. It is Wildfire moving on to the Elite Eight, and very sort of under the radar. This is a battle of last year's number 2 and number 3 coasters.
Yeah, you start looking at what's developing here, and this is another question mark. How much influence do the people out in Europe have here, and did Wildfire have enough riders? Some people like to say that Wildfire is amazing. We did have a few comments on the last show though that said Wildfire is just another run-of-the-mill RMC, that it doesn't really do anything special or new. It just does a whole lot of the traditional RMC stuff. So if you've been on other RMCs, maybe this one doesn't impress you as much. So the question is are those people voting, or are the people who have not been on other RMCs voting? And either case, is it enough to knock off a quality ride like Lightning Rock?
Yeah, I think ultimately those are some of the questions that you got to ask yourself, and we'll find out next week which ride is moving on to the Final Four here in the wood brackets. Any final thoughts on the wood bracket as a whole here? We talked about in the selection show how that first round in the wood bracket was extremely difficult.
Yes.
The second round, if you survive through the first round, the second round to me felt like it was probably easier.
No, I think that's absolutely true. If you were able to get correct answers in the first round, the second round should have been kind of a pick 'em, and it did not seem as difficult. Don't know if that's so much true about the steel, but I definitely felt with the wood, outside of like the Boardwalk Bullet Boulder matchup, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff to really pour over here.
No, there was a lot of chalk for sure in the second round of the wood bracket. So we're down to 8, and next week we get down to 4. So shall we move on and narrow our field of 16 down to 8 over in the steel bracket?
Yes.
All right. So let's go to the Skyrider region, and we've got Fury 325 from Carowinds going up against Twisted Timbers from King's Dominion. A matchup that I feel like a lot of people are overlooking. 2 top 5 coasters last year here.
Yeah, well, they're overlooking it because Fury is such a strong ride that I don't, Danny, out of the percentages of people picking this matchup, is anyone picking Twisted Timbers over Fury here?
There were a handful.
That's stupid. So
those people are wrong. It's Fury 325 moving on the quest to reclaim its crown from Steel Vengeance that Steel Vengeance took last year. Steel Vengeance trying to repeat. Fury looking to take it back. But Fury's not going to have. It's not going to get any easier for Fury because Andy, this is a big one. And this isn't so much a big one necessarily because of the long-term implications, because you've got Fury 325 over there. You've got potentially Steel Vengeance looming on the other half in a Final Four matchup. But Maverick last year, number 8. Yeah. Twisted Colossus last year, number 6. This, we talked about some divisive matchups in the first round. This is one that I can tell by the nearly even split in the second round. This is one that people struggled with mightily.
Now, Danny, a little backstory here, maybe. You were sitting on the phone with me as I filled out my bracket.
I was.
I did not pour hours into this process. Maybe.
No, you did not. You guys, let's break the fourth wall for a second here. I sent Andy screenshots of the blank brackets so he could do his. And I was on the phone with him while he was doing them, and he was done in less than 20 minutes.
Yeah,
did
less
both
than 20
brackets.
minutes.
And you'll see, he had struggled a little bit in the first round in the wood bracket. Not contesting that, but you'll see at the end of this round that Andy's doing quite well thus far.
And not spending that much time may have hurt me on things like picking Phoenix because maybe if I went back and opened up, some stuff, maybe I've been like, well, picking Phoenix over El Toro is just stupid. Like that probably would have popped out.
Mystic Timbers. I mean, maybe you would have gone with Rampage because it ranked higher last year. You might have gotten a few of those right.
However, though, this matchup right here, Maverick Twisted Colossus, probably would have given me more pause than it actually did when I filled out the paper. I wrote down Maverick. There was no question in my mind. Had I gone back and looked that Twisted Colossus was ranked number 6 and Maverick was ranked number 8, maybe I would have – I'm not going to say it was automatic. I did struggle a little bit. I wrote down Maverick, but then I thought about it. But then I just kept moving on. So it was something that gave me slight pause. But maybe if I would have looked back at this ranking, it would have given me more pause. So the question is me not putting any research into this going to benefit me in this matchup?
Well, and that's the big question here. Do you just pick them? Do you do some research? Do you do a little bit of both? One of these rides is moving on to take on Fury 325. And Andy, that ride is Maverick from Cedar Point. Are y'all ready for some serious sidewinding? Maverick is moving on to the Elite 8. The voters got it right this year.
Well, and that's, Danny, this is something that we've been talking about for a while, is the overranking of Twisted Colossus. Now, I don't know if Twisted Colossus is still at 6 and Maverick has just jumped up, but we've been saying this for a while now, that we have seen the storyline here be the steady rise of Maverick through the years. That Maverick, when we first started this, when it had the hard restraints, Maverick was down like at 15 at points.
It lost to Manta in a first-round matchup 5 years ago.
Like, I'm going to go to the...
You had to wear a Beast t-shirt because of that.
I'm going to go to the 2014 Steel rankings. I'm looking for Maverick right now. Maverick, where the hell is Maverick at on this list?
I want to say it was like 20-something.
Maverick is 19 in 2014. We are now in the year 2019, and it is now higher than Twisted Colossus, which last year was number 6. Granted, all of them could have dropped. I don't know. Maybe Twisted Colossus is 21 and Maverick is 19 again. I don't know, but my gut tells me that Maverick is doing this steady climb that we've been talking about. And is it the soft restraints? I don't know. Is it people finally coming to their damn senses? Hopefully so. Maverick is one of the best roller coasters in the country, best roller coasters in the world. And for it not to be in the top 4 every year has been the biggest travesty of justice in this tournament, next to Raptor not being in it at all.
Well, let's not talk about that. But I mean, I think you're right. Maverick should be a top 5 ride every year. And I'm happy to say that Maverick is higher than Twisted Colossus this year by virtue of moving on here. Now, Andy, with a little bit more of a somber note, I am shocked to report that one Rob Dole, who did very well in the first round, didn't have the faith to pick his own ride. He picked Twisted Colossus.
Are you kidding me?
That, Andy, we have given Rob
Maverick
a lot of grief.
Maverick Rob, the guy who calls himself Maverick. The same guy. We're talking about
Same guy. Now, Andy, we've given Rob a lot of grief. We know he spent a lot of time. He did quite well in the first round. I think he was in the top 10. But to me, There is no excuse
None.
when your nickname is Maverick Rob to not pick Maverick in such a close matchup. I don't understand it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that is worthy enough for Tournament of Terrible nomination for next year.
That is up there. Now, Danny, we're going to have to see. If you know what, Danny, I'll say this. If Maverick Rob wins this tournament, wins this bracket challenge, all will be forgotten. If he's not even close.
True. Do we still give it to him, though? I mean, this is
it's questionable, but we still have to give it to him.
All right.
But if he's nowhere close, it doesn't matter anyway because you're nowhere close.
Well, I think he's going to. I think it's all downhill from here.
We'll have to see where. But this is bordering on the inexcusable.
This is very inexcusable. This is absolutely blasphemous. So before we delve further into outrage, let's move on to the Thunder Looper region. We've got Goliath from Six Flags Over Georgia going up against Untamed from Walibi Holland, sort of the talk of the town after round one. If Coaster and Phoenix and Mystic Timbers and Rampage didn't catch your attention in the first round, Untamed knocking off Intimidator 305 certainly did. And
well,
there's a lot of people all of a sudden that are rather nervous by that ride moving on in the first round because of the historically high ranking of Intimidator 305.
And I will say that my error on Phoenix, some people are going to feel the same effects of that right here if you picked I-305, because I feel that Untamed has a really good shot to go to the Final Four here, right? Like there's no question that there's going to be we're gonna line out this bracket here real quick, and there's a real shot here. I'm not saying it's a shoo-in. I'm not saying that this is a foregone conclusion, but I'm thinking Untamed's got a real shot.
Well, we sort of alluded to that after the first round. I mean, Goliath has slowly fallen a little bit. Fleur de Demon is sort of an unknown here.
Not there.
Millennium Force, I mean,
I had it going over Smiler. So to me, Untamed's the pick here.
I mean, Millennium Force was number 5 once. I think at the very beginning it was hovering in the top 5, top 10, but historically, recently, Millennium Force has sort of been in that 10 to 15 range, which I think is okay. I think that's a pretty good spot for it. But Intimidator 305 has pretty much always been higher than Millennium Force. So, the fact that Untamed beat Intimidator 305, I'm sure there's a lot of people who, if we would have wiped the slate clean, after round one, I would go out on a limb and say that almost everybody would circle Untamed as their Final Four coaster from this region at this point. I think a lot of people had that matchup pegged as my Final Four winners coming out of that one.
No, I think you're absolutely right, but I think we first have to look at Goliath Untamed. To me, this is a gimme. Untamed moving forward.
And it is Untamed moving forward out of the Thunder Looper region here. So Untamed going to the Elite Eight and continuing a possible quest at a Final Four berth here. And for people who've ridden Untamed, I don't know that comes as a big surprise because Untamed is a fantastic ride. I described it very similar to a smaller version of Steel Vengeance. So I don't know that this is a terrible surprise to most people.
If you've gotten over the I-305 surprise, then this one should be no surprise.
No, I completely agree with that. Now, as for this next one, because of the recent rise of Smiler and now Millennium Force beating it, but then the whole unknown of Fleur de Demon, what do you think of this one? Because a lot of people had Smiler going to the Elite Eight from this grouping down here. A lot of people had Silver Star winning in the first round. Some people got Millennium Force. The bottom half of this one is really just a cluster in general.
Well, so it's I guess you got to decide how high you think Fleur de Demon's going to go here. I'm trying to get a ranking for last year. Was Flug even ranked last year?
No, this is the first year that it's actually had enough riders to get a valid ranking, which makes it even trickier.
Yeah, you raved and raved about it, but Millennium Force was ranked 13 last year. I don't see a ride like that just automatically jumping that high. I had Smiler winning this matchup anyway, so this is my one big error. So
it would stand to reason then that you would jump on the Millennium Force wagon since it knocked off Smiler.
Yeah, because Smiler and Millennium Force were right next to each other last year, so give one, take the other. I would take Millennium Force.
All right. Well, moving on to the Elite Eight to take on Untamed is Millennium Force from Cedar Point. So both Maverick and Millennium Force moving on to the Elite Eight this year. And Andy, Cedar Point ain't done yet because the big boy we haven't even gotten to yet. So all of a sudden, America's Rock and Roller Coast looks for sure like it's going to have 3 coasters in the Elite Eight. And I don't know that surprises anybody.
It really shouldn't. We've been saying for a while that Maverick should be there. Obviously, Steel Vengeance should be there. Millennium Force would be the pleasant surprise, I believe.
No, I think that's the one that people would sort of not expect to be there, but here it is in the Elite Eight. And it will have an opportunity to go to the Final Four, taking on Untamed next week. So shall we go to the other half? We'll go to the flashback region. And we just talked about it a moment ago. We've got an RMC battle between Steel Vengeance from Cedar Point, the defending champ, going up against Iron Rattler, a fine ride from Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. And, this is, I sort of feel bad for Iron Rattler here because Iron Rattler is a spectacular coaster, has done very, very well. And, I think it's just going to run into the Steel Vengeance buzzsaw here.
Well, someone has to, and in Iron Rattler, it's your turn.
Yes, it is. It is Steel Vengeance moving on to the Elite Eight. So 3 Cedar Point coasters moving on here out of the first 5. I don't think we have any left in the bracket from the Cedar Point train, but Steel Vengeance moving on to the Elite Eight, and it will take on the winner of another matchup that was highly, highly divided. Here, Nemesis from Alton Towers going up against X2 from Six Flags Magic Mountain. Andy, this one is really tough for me because these are 2 rides that I rank extremely highly. X2 has always been one of those very few rides that took me by such surprise and just really in a state of shock when I first got off of it. Nemesis was very similar, but Nemesis also has sort of that sentimental value, being a milestone coaster for me, one that I had anticipated years and years, finally getting over to ride it a couple years ago. What did you have going on here?
Well, Danny, I'm looking at my sheet that I filled out here right now, and I see there's 2 matchups that I wrote something down and then scratched something out. One of the 2 matchups was Smiler Millennium Force. I chose wrong. I wrote down Millennium Force, scratched it out, wrote down Smiler.
Oh, you did? I don't think you told me that.
Yeah, that was a mistake. I'm looking at my sheet right here. There's a scratch out right there. The other matchup that I have a scratch out, I wrote down Nemesis, scratched it out, and wrote down X2. And I think that's the proper way to go. Because last year, X2 was ranked 10, Nemesis was ranked 15. I think at the end of the day, this was one that I'm like, X2 is probably underranked, if anything. I don't know about Nemesis. You talk about Nemesis, other people talk about Nemesis. Great.
Nemesis, you sort of have to set my opinion aside just a little bit because of the sentimental aspect.
All the rigmarole going around with it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But I think X2 is, for me, it's right on the edge of my top 10. I still think that Nemesis would be right in that range if I gave it more of a fair ranking, if you will. This would be a very, very tough one for me to objectively decide.
For me, X2, top 5. So X2 for me, much higher. So once again, I take what the previous rankings were, mix it in a little bit with what my personal beliefs are. This one, I wrote down Nemesis, scratched it out, wrote down X2, and that's what I went with.
Well, Andy, in Millennium Force Smiler, you went against your initial instinct and you made a decision, turned out to be wrong. This time, you went against your initial instinct, and it turns out that it was right, X2. Moving on to the Elite Eight here. And you know what? X2 got a little bit of a sour deal the last several years, the first several years. But last year, X2 was one step away from the Final Four. This year, it's one step away again. I don't know that it's going to pull off the upset against Steel Vengeance and get to the Final Four, but X2 the last couple of years has had very, very good showings here in the Thrilling 32.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. That makes me happy because X2 is a ride that should be in the top tier of rides. It really should.
No, I agree 110% with you there. Let's wrap up. Let's find out who the last two participants in the Elite Eight will be this year from the Super Verbal region. And this is the no U.S. coaster region. Yeah. We've got one from Canada. We've got two from Germany. We've got one from Sweden here. Our first one is Leviathan from Canada's Wonderland going up against Terran from Phantasialand in Germany. This one, just a little bit of pause because you don't know how all the new riders for Terran have affected it, because we saw Nemesis top 5 to top 8 and is now settled into the 15 range. Could the same thing happen to a ride like Terran?
I don't think so. Terran ranked 4 last year. I don't know if it's going to stay that high, but it's going to beat Leviathan.
You hesitated an awful lot there.
Well, I'm hesitating an awful lot because I'm thinking about the next round already. This matchup doesn't.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
It's the next round that has me thinking.
Well, yeah. No, that's very true.
I'm one step ahead of everyone, Danny Miller.
Well, I don't know about that, but you might be a step behind us sometimes. But Anyways, moving on to the Elite Eight this year out of this matchup, it is Terran from Phantasialand. So Terran still proving to be very, very strong here. Now, who will take that last spot in the Elite Eight here this year in the 2020 edition of the Thrilling 32 from the 2019 Ride Warrior Choice Awards? It's Helix from Liseberg or Expedition G-Force from Holiday Park, a former champion there. We've got a lot of different things that could go on here. We could have Intamin versus Mach. We could have Intamin versus Intamin. We could have multi-launch versus multi-launch. We could have an all Germany battle for a Final Four spot here. We could have sort of the German championship once and for all, if you will, or at least until next year. Helix, Expedition G-Force, I know you're probably sitting there looking at the history, and the history doesn't really give you a whole lot to work with here.
Well, I think it gives you enough that you have Expedition G-Force last year coming in at 3. You have Helix at 7. All you fools went to go ride it, and you fools all said it was great. So there's
Expedition G-Force was great.
Yeah, there's that. So I don't foresee that you guys are going to make Expedition G-Force drop all that much, if any. I don't think Expedition G-Force, based on what you said, I don't see it jumping up. However, I also don't see it dropping too much. Well, slightly. And that's where the next round had me really thinking, because last year G-Force was 3, Terran was 4. That's what I was thinking about when I'm sitting there thinking about, you're talking about Leviathan. I'm thinking about that round because I think Expedition G-Force easily moves on against Helix, but next round, that's the killer.
So to put it in perspective, you take someone who's ridden 600 roller coasters and ranks Expedition G-Force in the top 10. That's roughly 98%. That's the 98th percentile there, or so. And that's right where Expedition G-Force has been. So someone who says, if you look at me and say, oh, well, Danny Miller, he ranks it, 8 or 9 or whatever the hell I said I ranked it. that's not going to hurt Expedition G-Force at all. It might actually help it just a touch. And, when you're thinking about that, there's always three possibilities when a bunch of people ride a new ride. It can go up, it can go down, or it can solidify where it is. So that's kind of sort of the debate we're having here. And that might really affect the outcome of this matchup here. And you said you selected Expedition G-Force.
Yes, I did. I went with G-Force here.
All right. Well, in the Elite Eight, we will see a German national championship because it is Expedition G-Force. Moving on to the Elite Eight. So now Expedition G-Force versus Terran in the Elite Eight, and the winner goes on to the Final Four. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a tough one. That's a killer. That one gave me a little pause. I don't want to reveal my pick though until next time.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Any thoughts on the steel bracket as a whole before we delve into the rankings just a little bit?
I don't think this round provided us with any real surprises coming out of here. I don't think there's a whole lot here.
Okay. All right. Fair enough there. So let's take a look at the standings. Sitting in first place is Michael White. He had perfect perfect rounds in both brackets this time around.
Oh.
So that's really quite the accomplishment, and not the only one. Actually, quite a few people having perfect rounds in one or the other bracket, but a couple people having perfect rounds in both. In second place is Toby Palmer, who also had perfect rounds in both brackets, and then several others having perfect rounds in at least one of the other brackets. So Michael has 65 points. Toby has 64 points. Everyone else shortly behind there. Andy, there's a couple people. There's a couple people here that we need to check in on, don't you think?
I do think so. One is me. One is Rob Dole. One is Brian Bass. Your whole family.
Yes. So let's take a look at the Danny Miller clan battle here first, because there's always sort of this friendly family rivalry between my mom, my dad, my brother, who was the champion last year, and then of course Aunt Sue. And my mom always likes to talk a little bit of trash because she's the only one who doesn't really ride rides, and she likes to heckle when she does better than the other people because she says, well, I only pick them based off of the previous rankings and whatever pictures I find on Google Images. That's literally how she picks them. And I don't feed any of them any information or anything. So my mom was actually in third, I believe, after round one. She had 7 out of 8 right in both, so still hanging strong, and they're in 8th place. Only 5 points off the pace at the moment, at 60 points. We scroll down a little farther. Next up is the defending champ, Brother Jackson, also 7 out of 8 in both, sitting in 32nd place with 55 points. My dad's sitting in 43rd place. He had 7 in the woods, 6 in the steel with 53 points. And then Aunt Sue actually improving a little bit, moving up to 109th with 43 points. Only 5 in the wood, but 6 in the steel. That wood bracket not being too kind to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So now, do we want to check in on you here, Mr. Rabarchek?
Sure, why not?
Let's see. What do we have? I feel like
my first round was not very good. I was like in 68th or something like that.
Yeah, and you've moved up a little bit. You're up to 63rd. You had 6.
Oh man,
51
Blazing
points.
up.
No, I know. You had 6 out of 8 in the wood and 7 out of 8 in the steel. But and we talked about this. You haven't revealed your final 4 picks to people yet, but you still have potential for a lot of points. We'll say that out there. Your finalists in both brackets are still alive. We know that Phoenix is sort of out for you, but you still have a lot of points that are potentially on the board here. So you still have an opportunity to make a little bit of a jump here. Who do we want to find next?
It's a marathon, Danny, not a race.
That's right. Let's find the impartial Brian Bass, who is all the way down at number 94 in the rankings. He actually didn't do too bad. He had 6 out of 8 in both this round, but he did not do too well in the first round. He only had 12 out of 16 in each of the 2 brackets in the first round. So that first round hurting Brian Bass a little bit here. What are your thoughts there? Who else do we want to find? Rob Dole. We got to find Rob Dole. Now, Rob Dole was, he was in 7th, right, after the first round? Where is Mr. Dole? So he's hanging in there. 9th place.
Oh, that's not too
for
bad.
one Rob Dole. Now, he had a perfect wood second round, 8 out of 8. And he had 15 out of 16 in the first round. So only one pick wrong in the wood bracket so far for Rob Dole. That's pretty good. And in the steel, he only had 1 wrong in the first round of the steel. He had Smiler over Millennium Force. But in the second round, only 6 out of 8, including that heartbreaking matchup where he selected Twisted Colossus over Maverick inexplicably. So he's currently sitting in a tie, actually with my mom for 8th place, I guess, but sitting in 9th. He's got 60 points. But had he selected Maverick, he would actually be in 5th place by himself with 62 points because there's 3 people with 61 above him. So again, just that one pick, the difference between like 4 or 5 spots up at the top and farther down, just 1 or 2 points, the difference between maybe 10 or 12 spots. So every pick is mattering here right now.
Absolutely. So I think that'll wrap us up here for tonight. We got some exciting stuff coming up here with this tournament that this is going to get, like this round, like we said, maybe not a whole lot of head scratchers, but once we get a little bit deeper here, we're going to get into some real matchups here next week in the steel, in the wood. We're going to have some real decisions to be made. And Danny, I don't know how I feel confident, with my steel rankings. I feel pretty confident with what I got here. My wood, who knows? I think I got the winner right.
Your wood is a little bit in shambles.
Because at the end of the day, Danny, I got news for you. The only wood coaster that really matters is Voyage. Outside of Voyage, does it even matter anymore what happens? Like, let's be honest.
You back?
Yeah. So I just started talking there to fill up time. So I just said, the only wood coaster that matters is Voyage anyway. So does it even matter? So you can just.
I'll chuckle a little bit.
Chuckle, and then I'll sign us off.
No, well, we will see how it all pans out as we continue through the Thrilling 32 here. Thank you guys again so much for your support throughout this each and every year. The awards, the Thrilling 32, the Tournament of Terrible, all that. We're having a great time going through this. We're sort of at the halfway point here now with award season, so we'll see how things conclude in the coming weeks.
So, as always, I am Andrew Barczak from Chicago, Illinois.
Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Right Warriors.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.